Hey, it's Adrian here. It's been a while since my last video. Lockdown, homeschooling kids, all gets in the way. If you're not familiar with my videos, I am a full-time teacher of the Alexander technique. And I just want to take this opportunity to actually add something to my previous video, which was specifically on gravity, because do watch it, I'll link to it below. But most people have an erroneous view of gravity as it pulls them down. In fact, it's pushing them up. And we very much use that to our advantage. Now, what I wanted to address was, well, firstly, I said something, someone picked me up on it, and one of my colleagues, I think I'm going to put it down to red light fever a little bit. But I use some slightly colourful language. And I'd rather be a little more scientifically accurate. And for that reason, I have just bought this book, this fantastic book, The Ascent of Gravity. Haven't started reading it yet. It's only arrived last week, but I will. So I'd be really clear in my own mind about the science. But what I want to talk about today was how gravity creates what we call in the Alexander technique, the phrase we use is head forward and up. Now that's a phrase Alexander used to remind himself not to be pulling back and down. It's that classic startle reflex. And if we don't do that, and we release out of that, what Alexander observed was that we coordinate better. And it's really interesting to point out, by the way, the Alexander technique does not come from theory. It was born out through observation. Alexander made some great observations. And his head forward and up one was a good one, despite actually, in his later years, he decided to stop using the phrase and encourage people to not use it. But because he never wrote that down in one of his books, because it's after his last book, it kind of stuck anyway. So it kind of doesn't matter. I think he was wrong, actually, in retrospect, to discourage it. I know why he did, because everyone tries to do head forward and up. Now, his classic phrase was, let the neck be free, to let the head forward go. Head go forward and up. And the important word there being let. And it's the one word people tend to filter out and then try to do it. It's just typical of behaviour. When we hear something, we filter certain bits out, the psychology of it. And it's very difficult to stop people trying to put their head forward and up. I think there are other ways to use that phrase that wouldn't encourage that. I think if you just know it's a reminder of what not to do, then it's fine. Although ironically, I have to admit myself, I never liked the phrase myself when I first had Alexander lessons. I was already kind of forward and up. I was a bit stiff and up, and it kind of bought into my old habit. So I've softened my view over the years, and I've now actually come to appreciate it. Now, the interesting thing about gravity is it does the forward and up for us. If we let it, it will happen. It's the default. So if we have gravity creating an upward lift from an accelerating force coming up underneath us, and that's a really important thing to realise that the units of gravity are meters per second squared. That's the same units as acceleration. So that acceleration is coming up underneath us, pushing us up. I know that's counterintuitive, which is why I suggest you watch my previous video, or just look up "Is Gravity a Force" on YouTube, and you'll get lots of videos on it actually, on why that's the case. But if we've got a column of our spine going up, let's see if I can get this right. Let's just say this is my nose. Now, if we've got a column of the vertebrae coming up underneath the skull, now the atlas joint that meets the skull is ever so slightly to the rear half of the skull. Now, if I totally exaggerate that and push there, what happens? My nose goes down. So if it's not so exaggerated, it's still going to happen. It's going to encourage a slight tilting forward of the head. And that's the up being up. And the forward is this rotation forward over this joint here. And it's done for you through gravity. Now, I think there's a case to be said that we can encourage a little more of that release by wishing to release into length through intention as an internal direction. But if we don't do it, and we're not getting in the way of ourselves, if we're not, pulling on our neck and being generally stressed out and the shoulders come up to the ears, we'll find that happens for us. Let the neck be free, and therefore you can let the head go forward and up. because gravity is the reason your head is going forward and up. So I think it's just really useful to know, so you can start trying to get this idea that, not to be a fish out of water. Whenever you say a fish swimming, think of a fish swimming, you always consider its environment as part of the picture. But when we think of each other as human beings, we kind of separate ourselves out from our environment. We really want to be fish in water. We really want to be humans in gravity, using our environment to our advantage. So that poise is easy. It's the default setting. It's kind of done for you if you inhibit. Inhibit is our Alexander jargon, not to be confused with the Freudian version of the phrase, but it just means to be non-reactive. So you can be released, not have tense muscles basically, and not have a tense mind. So the same thing. Tense muscles and mind are all one. But yeah, you can allow yourself to use to your advantage our environment. Obviously, we're evolved for it. We don't need to do good posture. It's kind of done for us. No other animal species has to worry about their posture. And for those that are about to say, other animals aren't bipeds. We're bipeds. We've got this unusual thing. We stand on 2 legs. Well, maybe, but we're still utterly evolved for it. And giraffes have pretty unusually long necks and seem to cope just fine. Might be 4 legs, but would you want that long neck? Well, why not if you knew how to use it? Doesn't matter. It's all easy. It's what we're evolved for. Of course, the problem being that we're evolved for one environment and we actually live in another. And the issue isn't gravity, which is trying to help us. The issue is really how we engage with our environment, with our computer screens. I've got my phone here. People get drawn into screens, and therefore that's the classic head forward posture, which happens with driving as well, and mobile phones, all sorts. And that's a behavioural aspect. And that's because our environment that we've created creates quite a psychological demand on us, and that then just changes our behaviour. So, a lot to think about there, but yeah, just take this idea on board that gravity will do your classic Alexander head forward and up for you if you let it. So, bear that in mind. All right, if you're interested in online lessons, I am here for that. I will be continuing my in-person lessons from now on, which is great. We look forward to that. But for the time being, for the next year, I think only in North London. I hope to maybe restart in Central London next year. All right, see you next time. Take care.